you can be on the. We are just getting in the space, so. Everyone. Hello. Klaas, Annalena. So Naoto, by the way, is here live. If we can we call that real? Got it. Okay. Cool. Maybe you can introduce this short text that is about, in a nutshell, what is this that we do? If you want, Naoto.
Yeah, sure. I can start. So I'm Naoto. I'm in Dortmund right now. I just read a text that I've written when we start, around the time we started the practice. We discussed what could be the best practices in contemporary dance. It is not like a simple response to contemporary dance, where every dancer has different practices and it's often self-referential, but also it's a proposition to explore contemporary dance in a systematic or more like to theorize what we do through the best practices. And specifically in network performances or net art, not many dancers or artists, or actually no one knows how to practice and embody the practice or like to develop bodily expressions through camera and screen. In contemporary dance, we know we go to the studio and we know the process, but if it comes to network, we don't know. Well, at the time the pandemic started, at least, and I think still we don't know. And we believe that we need a slow process, just like how we practice in a dance studio. It's not like we switch this on, switch that on, and you have 30 minutes of recording, but we need some kind of slow process. For example, this is like this is an online analogy of a studio space. That's what we wanted to create through this practice with Jorge. And also another aspect of this practice is that we imagine something like a weekly TV show, which was kind of also the idea of the best practices at first, that we meet every week, let's say every Thursday at 8 p.m., just like a TV show that you would just tune in and people can watch. Just like what's happening right now here in the background in my studio and also where you are at. We have two pillars of best practices. One is practice that is like this practice with the body and video and network between us. And another pillar is this format, which we call chat or hashtag chat, that we talk about what happened in the practice. And yeah, that's what we are trying to do today. Hopefully, right. And it's not going to be success or fail, and we like to fail.
Yes, thank you, Naoto, so much for the introduction. We haven't met properly, Annalena. So here's Annalena. Yes.
Hello. Hello.
Klaas, we met in Vienna, the Impulse Dance.
Hi, Naoto.
Hello.
Yeah. So yeah, I think what I want to underline somehow for what we do in a way is that we propose a space, and we have been working on that that proposes vulnerability, and it deals with uncertainty and not knowing, basically. So how could we? And this was when we were invited to a festival in Frankfurt. It was in Essen, no? And you know, in the Festival of Media, that we proposed also a chat at this format, and we were trying to not have to go in the classical sense of have to show our credentials and to show why are we worth it, or what is that we do that is so good that we have to be there, but rather we just propose a space where we share in a vulnerable state. about what we do without pretensions. So the chat that we propose is basically the space where we try to understand what is this about that we do and around also dance and technology, and moreover art and science. So basically is when we come and try to talk as chill as possible. So this is the second time that we're doing this in this format, just so you know.
In public.
In public, yeah. And we have been, I think this is the eighth time that we have guests, that we bring guests to the chat, and then we just talk together about the practice and other topics. So maybe something that I found super interesting to talk about right now is, like this collision where it's like, I don't know, like if it's straight like from art and science to like art and designing. Like, for instance, like now we proposed within the program there was a DJ set, and then after the DJ set, between two DJ sets, there was Contan was proposing some sound performance. So the framework of the sound performance is quite different than the DJ set, right? Like, while in the DJ set, it will be more, I guess, more party or more happy in that sense. I guess as I will speak personally, what I have experienced in sound immersive or live audiovisual performances, you go more into an introspection when you try to get touched by the waves and all these sounds that are proposed by the artist. I'm bringing this now because I think it's interesting. So it's nobody's fault. Like, oh, why it's not working? Why people were not paying attention? Or why? It's just part of how we're dealing with this. Basically, we're trying to put things together between like make things. We're trying to be happy, I guess, together. Sharing the spaces. But at the same time, then introducing art proposals. But then it collides. It's very difficult, which is the case, I think, in art and science also. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I was thinking also that we could talk perhaps what does it mean to be an artist these days? Like understanding this complexity, like is it the DJ and an artist? Like if the DJ was an artist, or is like the sound artist an artist? What does it mean to be an artist these days? Like maybe around this topic, I would like to maybe talk a little bit.
I think what is the most coming forward is not necessarily to see what is the difference, but to see what is the similarity between both. This I find always, or for me, is a way that is more, a bit more clear, to get new information. So if you see, there is the DJ is also he keeps going on. There is like a generative process going on there, and then with very often when you have to deal with art and technology, there's going to be a very generative aspect to it also. So this is something that brings the two together. There is not a very clear beginning and there is not a very clear ending. It's more a proposal of an environment, what you say, where you can immerse yourself. And then it's not to say, okay, but what is the difference? Because I don't think there is necessarily a difference. It is as blunt as to say it's a space and a time thing. For me, it can be both the same thing. If we put it in another space or we make a clear cut in time, then it becomes something different.
Yeah, I think for me, the interesting part is maybe the code with the audience that is always so clear. Like when I go into a party setting, I have kind of the agreement with the person at the table that we are gonna have like this shared time and space, and that it's gonna be physical, and it's that I'm invited to move my body. You know, there's this certain code. And then I really like, for example, me myself, I like to push this to see what can I do, an previewed performance in a club. Like, you know, like you have a club setting and the people think it's gonna be this code. It's gonna be me dancing and somebody is making sound for me that's groovy, that I can use my body. And then when you break this frame, or when you start to play with it, and you propose something more hybrid or something more deconstructed in this sense, then suddenly there is this a bit confusion. But I think the confusion then is in me as the audience and the public, like when it's not clear anymore, what's my frame, what's the code now.
And do you see that as a positive thing, like this?
I mean, myself as a performer, I love it. As an audience member, I'm not so sure if I love it. In the theater, it's the same. You know, you go, you know, I have, of course, there are now other formats, but usually you sit, you watch in front, and somebody's doing something for you, and then these formats are broken or are deconstructed. So I have to always, in every moment of the performance, I have to reflect what is my position, or who am I in this setting now, which as an audience member, of course, is different than doing it. But for me, as a performer, for example, also in the DJing or in sound performance, I like to blend it, that it's in between the code of as you named it, being happy. I think I name it more of being able to receive something very physical, and I can move my body, and and the aspect of sound performance, or more digging, or more like very sound researching and playing with like very, very soft or very loud, noisy stuff. So to constantly break it with the codes. And I also don't think, to go back to your question, whether he's an artist today, I think what I find always problematic is this thing of artist or non-artist. For me, I have a problem when I do my art, or when I do my stuff always for artists. I find it very boring, or like with an audience that is used to watch or to perceive an art proposal. And so I like to go with a performance or with a set to places where it's not expected to happen. Because I think this is where, for me, the friction happens, that it's becoming interesting when something happens in a space that it's not supposed to happen.
Yeah, like you said with the phone, that's supposed to happen. No, not at all. So I think one of the things what I found interesting in the framework that we work with Naoto is that we fail at some point. So we start working, I think, for 4 months without knowing what we were doing. At some point, we were invited for this festival called Note in Frankfurt. And then we were it was the first time that Naoto and myself, we met. And then we were working towards doing a performance. And we were like really trying to do it. And then we really failed. So it was not good at all. I mean, it was not good. And then, but what was interesting from that point is that we knew from that moment on that we didn't have to actually to do something. We just have to practice. We didn't have to change anything from what we were doing. And I'm saying that in regards to failing, you know, or achieving or scoring, or which is connected with science in that sense of reductionism and naturalism, in the way how normally you have to prove and measure basically the approach to something. I think is more interesting. So what I think is, or what we propose is rather than proposing something, we propose the conditions for something to happen. So that happens only in the moment that happens. Before and after, it's something different. And it actually liberates itself from the politics of doing good or wrong, because it's just a practice. And then some failing is absolutely good and okay. So I don't know how you see this for instance, this idea within your research, Klaas. I'm very curious.
But I'm also stepping away more and more of this idea of creating choreography and coming closer to through installation, but to go into a space where you have an environment where you can not even consciously break what you call the codes or the frames that are installed, but that you see, okay, also connecting a bit to the 60s, where we just have it happening here. And also what we do here, you are a facilitator, so it's not necessarily about doing different independent things, but for me today, to be a host of this, it starts from the moment the first person entered at 10 o'clock, and we will stop there, and there is a full dramaturgy of all these things together. So it helps me a lot to go really macroscopic, because or else you completely lose yourself and you get stuck in asking questions which are predefined for you without even knowing that you're dealing with things that are already predefined. So it's to take as far away macroscopic space and just say, okay, I want to bring people together, and how do I want this space to activate people, and what is the social dynamic that I want to create in that. And this for me is photography, or where I want to go towards, or I try to explore, and to use digital technology for that is a very grateful way. Why? Because you are bound to frames. So in a way, with choreography itself, I say, okay, I want to take the frame of what would have to be or has been choreography. I want to take that to the way, but at the same time, how I do it is by bringing in a lot of different strengths from technology in a way. So it's somehow like replacing what I find problematic by actually multiplying it.
By multiplying this that we find problematic.
Different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the thing that the main words that we always come back to when we research together are very open, and there is also the same, like what I mean with macroscopic and with also making it abstract, that you come together and you work only using a symbol of an arrow, and that's all the information we need. And then everybody has the thing to do with that, because it's so meaningful that it becomes meaningless. So you and that's a bit the thing with chaos, with making things unstable. You just create a space where people can find the freedom, but at the same time, it is very clear what needs to happen. You have one arrow, and boom, that's it.
I like that, because like in a framework with Naoto, we use this idea of like it's whatever, but it's a whatever that is still recognizable. It's a whatever that somewhat is still within the realm of what is possible. I make this analogy from what you were saying, that is still there's something very specific within this chaos.
But I think also I want to open it up, this thing, and if I may, to also hear if there is the people here that flirt with the hybrid between the art and the technology, because people here, or in some way, because I would like to hear other experiences and challenges that pop up in that sense, that it's a bit beyond my own practice.
Maybe I just jump in a bit. What I found very challenging with, like, especially with network performance, is that like it can be whatever, but also there are like fundamental conditions that the internet has to work. So in this case, like if my house's internet shuts down, then it's over. And it's very different from like when you're in a physical space, then you can have, well, not total control, but you can expect what will happen. But in this case of network performance, it's unpredictable. And that's why we said about the fail at the Node festival, that it was not that we did it poorly or it was not good. It's just that the computers didn't work and we didn't stream it properly that we expected in an expected way. And that's really difficult, that we have to confront this kind of unpredictable error. It's not even glitch. Like, it's not just like, I don't hear you well, but it's just completely silence. And then how would you deal with that as a dancer or artist if that happens, as if you promise to have a streaming as a performance?
But from my experience, also working with Contain, it's a huge challenge to bring the technology and the dance together from a temporal point of view, like from what is the tempo that you work in, how do you work, what is the space that you need to work. So what we are testing now is just to be in the studio together. We say, okay, we take even very limited time. We work in blocks of 1 hour. And we just work simultaneously. And even just to be in the same space at the same time to work already creates an environment where we will have an influence on each other, what we do. And there is moments where we go for simultaneity, and there is a moment where we go for preparation, where we say, okay, how many, it's something that we learned also, and it's really banal, but it's to say, okay, how much time do you need? Okay, this amount of time, okay, how much time do you need? And to check in. We even have here the thing, this, we take it when we go to the residency, because we are there also with Justine, the graphic designer, and everybody has completely different tempo of working, not only a personal tempo, but also a media tempo. If a graphic designer has to sketch, I have to be very physical in the space, and content has to be really inside his computer. Then it's okay, how do you work simultaneously, but simultaneously at the same time being aware that there is other people in the space. There is also an aspect of sound which can be disturbing, and that's also where the failure that I connect, and that I say we create an environment, and disturbance is actually one of the main players or the main creative tool in that environment.
Yeah, but I'm always thinking that I found when we try to work this towards, I have this experience when, so interdisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity, which are terms that nowadays are very more out these days, and it's so true that when people come together, the approach somehow, because of capital, just the constraints of a society that we live, is functional. So for instance, like in our framework, then that was something that we proposed, like the framework, we said that it's a queer form of conversation between technology and bodies. And we said that it's queer because it tries as much as possible to not take a side. So it's not dance because it's not dance, but it's also not video. So it's everything that is in between these two spaces, and it's tried to not be functional in the sense that it's not dance, that it hires the services of technology to enhance the dance, but it's also not doing the opposite. And I think that's a tricky thing, because we're working with technological means, and it's binary. The nature of these things are binary. So how to keep the fluid, maybe like I'm trying to bring it, how to keep fluid these frameworks.
I don't understand why it would be. I mean, first of all, I think I don't necessarily, okay, that it's binary is really almost technical. I like to see it more as numerical, that it's numeric. So you just need numbers. That's what we need in the end. But how can numbers express experiences? That's one of the big struggles that we have now. So then you come very close to where you have also what you proposed, a hybrid between science and dance, where we work with sensors, where we are now contacting people to have body suits that will show heat or then this tracks somehow the experience of the dancers, so that we have, again, like the arrow, an information which is so refined or so abstract that we can share it with whomever, which is just a number. And the number we can share with whomever, and it gives the freedom to the people, but at the same time, it will always symbolize something that comes from me. If I have this experience and that's for me is number 6, or it is in a scale, okay, when you say, okay, if my heartbeat is between this, and then you have a threshold there and it goes beyond it, it means there's going to be a cue to content, for example, for the sound. So content doesn't need to know what is my experience, you just need to get the signal. And I think that's also, for me, I find it more interesting because I don't think we will, it's very interesting to share our experiences verbally of what we do. That's really interesting, and I don't say that's bad, but we will never be able to do that. So I don't see why keep digging in that pit if we can say, or if we can just accept it and say like, okay, we can talk about it, but let's just give it a number and I give it to you. And in the end, it's not about us, but it's about the whole result, the performance, the sound, the space, the reaction, the chain reaction of how this is being mediated and creating a new output.
Mm.
Because we're not doing science.
What there I find interesting, because I don't work with other people in this sense. Like, I do work with other people, but not with technology people. But I have a person who's doing technology and I'm doing something else. But what I like in the technology or working with like programs or applications or pre-setting of programations or like templates is to have in this sense an amateur, not a studied vision on it, and to see how can I become a creator with things that are actually, again, they are like, as you say, with the arrow, but it's like the templates or the programs are made for a certain kind of use. And then I just become a user. And how can I go away from just being a user and to go to be a creator again? And there for me also the failure, or I name it more as the accident. How can I create a space that accidents can happen or failure of the program? Like this video programs also sounds, sometimes when, I don't know, like you do something and the computer of course does it correctly, but you have a complete other outcome that you expected. And to work is to really create a space in my practice that accidents can happen. And also the not understanding the programs completely. I never learned something from 0 to 100. I also worked autodidactic or learned autodidactic. So I always have some glimpse of understanding of how it works. But then also like programming a little bit. How can I go into a code, just shift it a little bit, and then it comes something out that I don't really understand in a very deep sense of understanding what I'm actually doing. But, or why it's reacting exactly like this. And then to see it happens this, and then to kind of completely, how do you say it in English, like use it in a sense that it's not foreseen for. Like to have, for example, this templates that you can program on website. We have this website project. So then you have all create and you have all these icons and stuff and it moves, and then just by altering a little bit the codes or by altering to film the screens and again filming screens to be like in a very, and there I would put the word intuitive. And this I think is something that we learn in art school, to trust like the intuition and to go with the azar, like the accident. But for example, there to really work then with another person, this I don't have so much experience to, because I think it's working alone, of course, it's completely different. I have always my rhythm that is kind of synchronized with myself.
I'm gonna have to apologize. For myself.
Yeah, but I
I
think,
have to put on a costume.
yeah, but I think we could be closing this 28 minutes. Is there around 30 minutes?
I'd like to just.
That would be nice. Yeah, so maybe.
One thing.
Yes.
Is, I think the discussion is around science and art and then it's a very interesting making space for accidents and using things not in the way they are. Let's not forget that science also evolves this way. The very methodological science that has to follow plan, well, this is true in some spaces like the laboratory, some protocols, but science doesn't follow that. Let's not forget that penicillin was discovered because of an accident, but a lot of progress in science came from accidents and things, technologies that were used in the way that they were not used. So I wanted to stress this just to blur further the frontier between art, science, because today we have these very rigid conceptions of these different domains, while the frontier are definitely much blurrier.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, specifically we just have an exposition, the opening of an exposition of a collective of art. If you have to go, maybe just go back. Maybe just keep talking here for a little bit. For those who want to say. So that we have the opening for an expo of an art and science collective I'm a part of, called SEEDS, which stands for Space Ecologist, Art and Design. And it was like the first time that we sent 2 times artwork to space, 2 times. So is this, the framework is very, and in what I'm trying to show here is that in the opening, I could see like the struggle of putting this, putting the program together. Because in science, normally then you will have this approach that is very reductionist, but I think it's called naturalism, that is about reducing everything until you get to a point that is, that everything, like a PhD goes always in a, when you do a PhD, is something that is very specific. So while, and I found something that is very interesting at the same time that is happening, and it's being listening at this point is about this idea of complexity science, which is an entanglement of not only naturalists, but understanding chaos, and that has to be a lot with randomness and what the powers of computers bring. So there is specifically with the computers, but it's interesting and it's related with chaos theory, is that scientists cannot understand how a process goes, but they on an artificial intelligence framework, but they know they get to some point, which is the same case in quantum physics. So science cannot understand the process, but they know there is something that will come at the outcome. And this is something that is problematic for the naturalists, like to not understand this process, because that's the path that we have been followed so far until these days. And now because we have the computers have this power, these things are being introduced, like to being more open in these questions, like why not? Could be also a science that involve different fields. But I think that, but I think in reality it's very complex, you know, to make everybody happy. Like in the opening, it was clear, it was very, very difficult because the framework was for families, but it is artwork and it's about like that's something that went to the space, to the International Space Station, and then so it's a bit difficult to make it performative, like that everybody's happy within that framework. You have families, but also that you can also express something that is used bioinformatics, data visualization, and also maybe abstraction in terms of just art. It was very conflicted, and I think it's something that is not, or I haven't, so far I think it's not going to change because there are different realities of it's a complicated marriage, I would say. This idea of mixing different frameworks. So I don't know if somebody else have some of like you want to say something. Then we can just. You want to say something? Okay. So thank you very much for sharing the space. And then I invite you guys to go outside and then I can put some music. And then we go to Annalena. Okay, Naoto,
Thank
thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you so much.
Ciao.
See you soon.
See you.